Now that we've implemented the undo and redo functionality, let's go ahead and update our UI to have some undo and redo buttons and make sure everything is working correctly. The first thing we're going to do is destructure this and grab both undo and redo from our tic-tac-toe, our use tic-tac-toe function, undo and redo. Let's go ahead and return those two from a setup function just to make them available on the template. And the next thing we're going to do is create some buttons and enable the user to actually undo and redo moves. We're going to have a click listener in here, and let's just say undo for here, and that's going to be undo. We're going to have something very similar down here. It's going to be redo for redo. Let's go ahead and try this one out. If I head back to the browser, we have our undo and redo buttons. Clearly there's going to be a bug here if I try and undo to the past where there's no move, or redo, and that is going to break everything. So we're going to have to add some defensive programming to stop that from happening. Anyway, let's see if this does work with the ideal path. I'm going to make some moves, and it looks like undo and redo are now working correctly. Let's go ahead and update our tests and then make sure that you can't undo and redo to an invalid state. We're going to use TDD for this just because I think that's probably the best way to do it. And we're going to create a new test block down here because it is a very different feature. I'm going to call this one undo and redo, and we're just going to test these both in one go. What we're going to do is use a very similar test to what we have here. If I undo and redo this, nothing should happen because there's no previous or next state. So we'd expect this one to pass. If I go ahead and save this off, it of course is going to fail. We get some kind of error. It says undo is not defined because we haven't even got undo. Let's go ahead and grab those, save this one off, and everything is actually surprisingly passing. I'm not too sure why that's the case. I guess we got kind of lucky. Let's remove this, and there we go. So we got kind of lucky here. We're undoing to an invalid state, but then we're redoing to a valid state that does exist. This is probably not a good thing to happen. Obviously in the UI, this actually probably doesn't crash anything. Let's try it out. Undo and redo. So this is actually working in the UI as well. This is not very intuitive, so I'm going to go ahead and just disallow that entirely. So what we're going to do is actually just remove this one for now, save this off, and our test is now failing, and we would expect this one to pass as well. So let's go ahead and update our implementation. Going to head back to game.js, and what we need to do is have some defensive checks down here. So I'm going to go ahead and put curly braces around here to let me write some more functionality. And we're just going to have a check here and see if current moves.value is triple equal to 0. So it's going to be the very first move. And in that case, I'm just going to go ahead and return. If we save this one off, it is now passing. Let's go back and implement redo as well. And just to make sure this is clear, I'm actually going to make two tests. I'm going to have one separate undo and one separate for redo. So let's go ahead and update this one, redo, save this one off, and we have one failing test. We now need to do the same check. We have the undo for redo as well. Let's jump in here and do that now. So what we need to do is a little bit different here. We're going to see if the current boards.value, which is the history of all the boards, and then we're going to grab the current index and add one onto it to see if there's a future move, which is going to be current move.value plus 1. And if this doesn't exist, we know we're in the future, there's no valid move, so I'm just going to go ahead and return. Let's save this off and see what happens, and that one is now passing as well. Let's head back to our browser and see if this implementation is actually correct. You can see now I can't undo and redo, which is a desired behavior. Everything is working correctly. There is one more use case we need to solve for. I'm going to show you that in the next lecture.